This is Gelila International Seminary for Psychological Disorder Part 2. This basically focuses on psychotraumatic, post-traumatic disorder, stress disorder, extremely stressful or traumatic events such as combat, natural disaster, terrorist attack, place the people who experience them at increased risk of developing psychological disorder such as post-traumatic stress disorder. The term post-traumatic disorder was developed given that the symptom could happen to anyone who experience trauma. A broader definition of this PTSD, post-traumatic disorder, was listed among the anxiety disorder in previous DSM edition. In DSM-5, it is now listed among a group called trauma and stressor-related disorder. A person who diagnosed with PTSD, she be must exposed to, witness or experience the detail of traumatic experience. This experience can include combat or threaten or actual physical attack. Second, sexual assault. Third, the natural disaster, terrorist attack, and automobile accident. These criteria make PTSD the only disorder listed in DSM in which cause extremely trauma and explicitly specified. Here are the following basic symptoms of PTSD. One, it is distressing memory of events. Flashback state that can last for a few seconds to several days, including which individual reveals the event and behave as if events were occurring at that moment. Avoidance of stimuli connected to event, persistently negative emotional states, fear, anger, guilty, and shame. Feeling of detachment from others is another symptom. Irritability, poorness toward outburst or exaggerated stress response, the jumpiness, for example. For PTSD to be diagnosed, the symptom must occur at least 1 month. 1 month. Nearly 21% of residents of area affected by Hurricane Katrina suffered from PTSD 1 year following the hurricane, and 12.6% of Manhattan residents were observed as having PTSD 2 to 3 years after 9/11 terrorist attack. What are the risk factors for PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder? Of course, not everyone who experiences traumatic event will go on to develop PTSD. Several factors strongly predict the development of PTSD. One, trauma experience. Second, greater trauma severity. Third, lack of immediate social support, and more subsequent life stress. Traumatic event that involve harm bias, carrying greater risk than do other traumas. Factors that increase the risk of PTSD include female gender or low socioeconomic status, low intelligence, person history and mental disorder, history of childhood adversity, and a family history of mental disorders, most important. Personality characteristics such as somatization, tendency to experience physical symptoms when one encounters stress, have been shown to elevate the risk of PTSD. People who experience childhood adversity or traumatic experience during adulthood are at significantly high risk of developing PTSD if the necessary possess one or more two short versions of gene that regulate the neurotransmitter serotonin. They suggest that possible DITC stress interpretation of PTSD, its development is influenced by interaction of psychological and biological factors. Support for suffered for PTSD. Research shows that social support following traumatic event can reduce the likelihood of PTSD. Social support, often defined as compact advice, assistance received from relative, friend, and a neighbor, can help individuals cope during difficult time, allowing them to discuss feeling and experience, providing sense of being loved and appreciated. In addition, those who become involved in the community were less likely to develop PTSD, and they were more likely to experience resumption of PTSD, and those who were less involved. Research shows that strong social support decreases the risk of PTSD. This person, for example, on your book and manual, figure 1.4 experience this PTSD. Learning and the development of PTSD important. PTSD learning module suggests that some symptoms are developed, maintained through classical conditioning. The traumatic event may act as an unconditioned stimulus that elicits unconditional response characterized by extreme fear and anxiety. Cognitive, emotional, physiological, environmental cues accompanying related to event are conditioned stimuli. The traumatic reminder evoke conditional response. The difference in how conditionable individuals are helped to explain difference in development and maintenance of PTSD symptoms. Conditioning state demonstrates facilitated acquisition or conditioned response and delayed extinction of conditioned response in people with PTSD. One model suggests that two key processes are crucial. One, disturbance in memory for event. Second, negative appraisal of trauma and its aftermath. Important. According to this theory, some people who experience trauma do not form coherent memory of trauma. Memory of traumatic events are poorly encoded, and thus are fragmented, disorganized, and lacking in detail. Therefore, these individuals are unable to remember the event in a way that given its meaning and the context. And this model proposed that negative appraisal of events, I deserve to be raped because I'm stupid, for example, may lead to dysfunctional behavioral strategy. Avoiding social activity where men are likely to be present that maintain PTSD symptoms are preventing both a change in nature of memory and a change in problematic appraisal. In summary, post-traumatic stress disorder was described through much of 20th century and was referred to as a shell shock and a combat neurosis, in the belief that its symptoms were thought to emerge the stress of active combat. Today, PTSD defined as, most important, a disorder in which experience of traumatic or profoundly stressful events, such as combat, sexual assault, natural disaster, produce constellation of symptoms that must last for 1 month or more. This is most important criteria or the existence or the presence of this PTSD of an individual. The symptoms include distressing memory of events, flashback, avoidance of stimuli and situations that connect to the event, persistently negative emotional state, feeling detached from others, irritability, poorness toward outbursts, and tendency to be easily startled. Never, not everyone who experiences traumatic event will develop PTSD. A variety of risk factors associated with development have been identified. The other one is the mood disorder. Blake carry all day and the feeling that it's worthless and the life is hopelessness. He cannot get out of bed. Crystal stay up in all night, talking very rapidly, and went on shopping spree in which 3,000 on furniture, although she cannot afford it. Mary recently had a baby and she feels overwhelmed, tearly, anxious, piqued, and believes she is terribly muzzled. Practically every day since the baby was born, all this individual demonstrates symptoms of potential mood disorder. Therefore, mood disorder is characterized by the following. 1. Severe disturbance in mood and emotion. Most often depressed, but also mania and delusion. All of this experience fluctuation in our mood and emotional state, and often these fluctuations are caused by events in our life. We become overjoyed if our favorite team wins the World Series and dejected if romantic relationship ends or if we lost our job. At times, we feel fantastic and miserable for no clear reason. People with mood disorder also experience one, mood fluctuation, but their fluctuations are extreme and very high. Distorts their outlook on life and impair ability to function in life is one most important. You can see on your manual, for example, figure 1.50, mood disorder characterized by massive disruption in mood. Symptoms can range from extreme sadness, hopelessness of depression to extreme illusion and irritation of mania. The DSM-5 lists two general categories of mood disorder. One, depressive disorder, a group of disorders in which depression is main feature. Meaning, depression is a vague term that everyday language refers to intense and persistent sadness. Depression is heterogeneous mood state. It consists of broad spectrum of symptoms that range in severity. Depression, people feel sad, discouraged, hopelessness. Depression disorder vary by degree and importance. The second most important category of mood disorder next to depressive disorder is bipolar related disorder, are a group of disorders in which mania is defining feature. Mania is a state of extreme elation, joy and agitation or worry. When people extremely mania, they may become extremely talkative, behave necklessly, attempt to take on many tasks simultaneously. Most recognized of this disorder is bipolar disorder. The other one is major depressive disorder according to DSM-5. Defining symptom of major depressive disorder include depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day, feeling sad, empty, hopelessness, appearing tearful to others, and a loss of interest and pleasure in usual activity. In addition to feeling overwhelming sad most of the day, people with depression will no longer show interest or enjoyment in activity that previously were gratifying, such as hobbies, sports, sex, social event, and the time spent with the family and so on. Friend and family member may notice that person has completely abandoned previously enjoyed hobby. For example, an avid tennis player who developed major depressive disorder no longer play tennis. To receive a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, one must experience total of 5 symptoms at least 2-week period. The symptoms must cause significant distress, impair normal functioning, and they must not be caused by substance or medical condition. At least one of the 2 symptoms mentioned above must be present, plus any combination of the following symptoms. 1, significant weight loss when not dieting, or weight gain, or significant decrease or increase in appetite. Second, significant failing sleep or sleeping too much is one most important symptom. Third, psychomotor agitation. A person is noticeably demonstrates behavior like inability to sit, pacing, hand wringing, pulling, and others. Fatigue or loss of energy, another symptom. Feeling of worthlessness or guilty. Difficult concentration, suicidal agitation, thought of death is most important symptom of this major depressive disorder, in addition to above 5 most important experience. This major depressive disorder considered episodic. It is symptom typically present at their full magnitude of certain period of time, then gradually appear. Although episode can last for months, majority of people diagnosed with this condition recover within a year. However, substantial number do not recover. Around 20% show serious sign of impairment associated with major depressive disorder after 5 years. In long run, in long term, many who do recover will still show minor symptoms that fluctuate in their severities. Results in relation to major depressive disorder seems like is a serious and incapacitating condition that have devastating effect on the quality of one's life. A person suffers from this disorder profoundly miserable existence that often result in availability for work or education, abandonment of promising career, and last wage. Occasionally, the condition requires hospitalization. Majority of those major depressive disorder report having faced some kind of discrimination, applying for job for which they are qualified, applying for education or training. Major depressive disorder also toll on health. Therefore, depression is a risk factor for development of heart disease in health patients, as well as cardiovascular outcome in patients with pre-existing heart disease. What is the most important risk factor? Major depressive disorders often referred to as the common cold psychiatric disorder. Around 6.6% of US population experience major depressive disorder each year. 60.9% will experience disorder during their lifetime. It is common among women than men, affecting approximately 20% of women and 30% of men some point in their life. This is Gelila International Seminary for the course Psychological Disorder. The greater risk among women is accounted for tendency to report symptoms or to seek help more readily suggesting that gender difference in rate of major depressive disorder may reflect biological, gender-related environmental experience. Lifetime rate of major disorder tend to be highest in North and South America, Europe, Australia. They are considerably low in Asia countries. This according to research findings. The rate of major depressive disorder highly among younger age cohorts than among older cohorts. Perhaps because people in younger age cohorts are more willing to admit depression. Number of risk factors associated with this one. For example, unemployment. Earning less than $20,000 per year, living in urban area, being separated, divorced, widowed, and etc. Comorbid disorder include anxiety disorder and substance abuse disorder. This means that more or less similar in its symptoms. There are another most important subtype of depression. DSM-5 lists several different subtypes of depression. For example, the subtype what DSM-5 refer to specified are not specific disorder, rather they are labeled used to indicate specific pattern of symptom or to specify certain period of time in which the symptom may be present. One subtype is the seasonal pattern, applied to a situation in which a person experiences the symptom of major depressive disorder only during particular time of year. In everyday language, people often refer to this subtype as a winter blue. The second subtype is the pre-pubertal onsets, commonly referred to as postpartum depression, applied to women who experience major depression during pregnancy or in the 4 weeks following the birth of their child. The symptoms often feel very anxious and may even have panic attacks. They may feel guilty and be weepy. They may not want to hold or carry their newborn, even in the case which pregnancy was desired and intended. In extreme case, mother may have feeling of wanting to harm her child or herself. In her illustration, a woman named, for example, Andrea Yates, who suffered from extreme this onset depression, drowned her 5 children in Basu. Most common with this depression do not physically harm their children, but most do have difficulty being adequate caregivers. People with this persistent depressive disorder experience depressive mode most of the day, nearly every day of at least 2 years, as well as at least 2 of the other symptoms of major depressive disorder. The other one is the bipolar disorder. A person who with bipolar disorder, commonly known as manic depression, often experience mood states waver between depression and mania. That is, a person's mood said to alternate from one emotional extreme to another, in contrast to unipolar, which indicates persistently sad mood. To be diagnosed with this bipolar disorder, a person must have experience of manic episode at least once in his life. Although major depressive episodes are common in bipolar disorder, they are not required for diagnosis. According to DSM-5, a manic episode is characterized as distinct period of abnormally and persistently elevated, expansive and irritable mood, and abnormally and persistently increased activity or energy lasting at least 1 week. The person who may loudly or rapidly exhibiting flight of idea, abruptly or shortly switching from one topic to another. Thus, individuals are easily distracted, which can make conversation very difficult. This may exhibit grandiosity, in which they experience exaggerated but unjustified self-esteem and self-confidence. Patients may also recklessly engage in pleasurable activity that could have harmful consequences, including spending speeds, reckless driving, making foolish investment, extensive gambling, engaging in sexual encounter with strangers. This is most important. However, the reckless behavior that often accompanies this episode, which can be antisocial, illegal, physically treating to others, may require involuntary hospitalization. Some patients with this bipolar disorder will experience a rapid cycling subtype, which is characterized by at least 4 manic episodes. or some combination of at least 4 manic and major depressive within 1 year. The risk factor for this bipolar disorder is considerably less frequent than major one or major depressive disorder. In the United States, for example, 1 out of every 167 people meets criteria of bipolar disorder each year, and 1 out of 100 meets criteria within their lifetime. The rates are higher in men than in women, and about half of those with this disorder report onset before age of 25. Around 90% of those with bipolar disorder have comorbid disorder, most often anxiety disorder and a substance abuse problem. Unfortunately, close to half of the people suffering from bipolar disorder do not receive treatment. Suicide rates are extremely high among those with bipolar disorder. Around 36% of individuals with this disorder attempt suicide at least once in their lifetime. And what most importantly, biological base of mood disorder again, the mood disorder have been shown to have strong genetic and biological basis. Relative to those with major depressive disorder have double the risk of developing major depressive disorder, whereas relative to patients with bipolar disorder have over 9 times the risk. The rate of concordance for major depressive disorder higher among identical twins than fraternal twins, suggesting genetic factor play a stronger role in bipolar disorder than major depressive disorder. People with this mood disorder often imbalance in certain neurotransmitters, particularly the norepinephrine and the serotonin. Thus, neurotransmitter important regulator of bodily functions that disrupt a mood disorder, including appetite, sex drive, sleep, arousal, or mood. Medication that's used to treat major depressive disorder, typically both serotonin and other neurotransmitter. Whereas the lithium used in treatment of bipolar disorder block norepinephrine activity in the synapse. Depression is linked to abnormal activity in several regions of brain, including those important in assessing emotional significance of stimuli and experiencing emotion, in regulating and controlling emotion like prefrontal cortex and others. Depressive individuals show elevated amygdala activities, especially when presented with negative emotional stimuli. Interestingly, highlighted activity or negative emotional stimuli among depressed persons occur even when stimuli are presented outside of conscious awareness and persistent even after the negative emotional stimuli are no longer present. Additionally, depressed individuals exhibit less activation in the prefrontal, particularly on the left side of our brain. These findings suggest that, for example, depressed persons are more prone to react to emotional negative stimuli, yet have greater difficulty in controlling this reaction. Depressed individuals react to negative emotional stimuli such as sad face with greater amygdala activities and do non-depressed individuals. Since 1950s, researchers have noted that depressed individuals have abnormal level of cortisol, a stress hormone released into blood by the neuroendocrine system during the time of stress. Many people with depression show that elevated cortisol level, especially those reporting to the history of early life trauma such as loss of parents or abuse during childhood. Such findings raise the question whether the high cortisol level are cause and a consequence of depression. High level of cortisol are a risk factor for future depression. Cortisol activity while deactivating activity of PFC. Thus, high cortisol level may have causal effect on depression, as well on its brain function abnormality. Also, because stress results in increased cortisol release, it is equally reasonable to assume that stress may associate depression. The other one is the diathesis stress model of major depressive disorder. Indeed, it has long been believed that stressful event can trigger depression, and research has constantly supported this conclusion. Stressful events including significant loss, such as death of loved one, divorce or separation, serious health and money problem, life events such as this often precede onset of depression episodes. In particular, exit event, an instant in which important personal depart, death, divorce, separation, a family member often occur prior to episode. Exit events are especially likely to trigger depression if this happening occur in way that humiliates or devalue the individual. For example, people who experience breakup of relationship initiated by other person develop major depressive disorder at a rate of more than 2 times that of people who experience death of loved one. Likewise, individuals who are exposed to traumatic stress during childhood, such as separation from parent, family trauma, maltreatment, physical, sexual abuse, are heightened risk of developing depression at any point in their life. That is key and most. Of course, not everyone who experience stressful events or childhood adversity yields to depression. Indeed, most do not. Clearly, the dice stress interpretation of major depressive disorder in which certain predisposition or vulnerability factor influence one's reaction to stress would seem logical. Therefore, this is one most important. Childhood maltreatment did not increase the risk of chronic depression for those have too long version of this gene. Thus, genetic vulnerability may be one mechanism through which stress potentially lead to depression. You can see on your module figure 1.80 a study on genetic environment reaction in people experiencing chronic depression in adults suggests that much higher incidence in individuals with short version of gene in combination with childhood maltreatment. The other one is the cognitive theory of depression. It's most important again. Cognitive theory of depression take the view that depression is triggered by negative thoughts, interpretation, self-evaluation, and expectation. This diathesis stress model proposed depression is triggered by cognitive vulnerability, negative and maladaptive thinking, and by stressful events. Perhaps the most well-known cognitive theory of depression was developed in 1960 by psychiatrist Aaron Beck based on clinical observation supported by research. Beck theorized that depression-prone people possess depressed schema, mental predisposition to think about most things in negative way. Depression schema contain theme of loss, rejection, worthlessness, and inadequacy, and may develop early in childhood response to adverse experience, then remain dormant until they are activated by successful or negative life event. Depressive schema promote dysfunctional and pessimistic thoughts about the self and the world and the future again. Beck believed that this dysfunctional style of thinking maintained by cognitive biases, error in how we process information about ourselves, which lead to focus on negative aspect of experience, interpreting things negatively, and block positive memory. A person whose negative schema, depressive schema, consists of a theme of rejection may be overly attentive to social clue of rejection, and a sign of rejection automatically remember past incident of rejection. In a different longitudinal study supported Beck theory in such that pre-existing tendency to engage in the negative self-defeating style of thinking when combined with life story, stress over time predict onset of depression. This is Gelila International Seminary for the course Psychological Disorder. Cognitive theory for depression aimed at changing depressed person negative thinking were developed as expansion of this theory of Aaron Beck. Another cognitive theory of depression, hopelessness theory, postulates that a person's particular style of negative thinking leads to sense of hopelessness, which then leads to depression. According to this theory, hopelessness is an expectation that unpleasant outcome will occur, or that desired outcome will not occur, and there is nothing one can do not prevent such outcome. The key assumption of this theory that hopelessness stems from tendency to perceive a negative life event as having stopped. Hopelessness theory predicts that people who exhibit this cognitive style in response to undesirable life event will view such event as having a negative implication for their future and self-worth, whereby increasing the likelihood of hopelessness. That is the primary cause of depression. And again, one study testing hopelessness theory measures the tendency to make negative inference for body life effect in participants who were experiencing uncontrollable stressor. The third cognitive theory of depression focused on how people thought about their distressful mood. Depressed symptoms in particular can increase the risk and the duration of depression. This theory much focused on reflection in the development of depression, was first described in 1980 to explain higher rate of depression in women than in men. Women are more likely than men to ruminate when they are sad and depressed. The tendency of reflection associated with increase in depression symptoms highlight risk of major depression episode and chronicity of such episodes. And the other one is suicide. For most people who mood disorder, the extreme emotional pain they experience become painful. Overwhelmed by hopelessness, devastated by incapacitating feeling of worthlessness, and burdened with inability to adequately cope with such feeling, they may consider suicide to be a reasonable way out. Suicide, according to CDC, death caused by one's self-directed injuries, behavior with any intent to die as a result of the behavior. In a sense, represent outcome of several things going wrong all the time. Not only the most person be biologically, psychologically vulnerable, but he must also have means to perform the suicidal act. He must lack the necessarily protective factor. Suicide is not listed as a disorder in DSM-5. However, suffering from mental disorder, especially mood disorder, poses the greatest risk for suicide. Around 90% of those who complete suicide have diagnosis at least one mental disorder, with mood disorder being most frequent. In fact, association between major depressive disorder and suicide is so strong that one criteria for the disorder is thought of suicide. This is Gelila International Seminary for Psychological Disorder course. What is the basic risk factor? Basic course for risk factor for this suicide is basically most important. Suicide risk is especially high among people with substance abuse problem. Individuals with alcohol dependency are at least 10 times greater risk of suicide than general population. The risk of suicidal behavior is especially high among those who made prior suicide attempts. Suicide have, again, some contagious effect on peoples. And Australian researcher, for example, found that significant increase in the number of suicide by firearm in the 3 weeks following extensive reporting on Australia's largest newspaper, for example. One possible contributing factor is brain chemistry. Contemporary neurological research shows that disturbance in functioning of serotonin are linked to suicidal behaviors. Low level of serotonin predict future suicide attempt and suicide completion, and a low level have been observed post and others. Therefore, serotonin dysfunction, low level of serotonin highly contribute. The combination of these three characters constitute potential formula for suicide, especially the violent suicide. In summary, the mood disorders, those which person experience severe disturbance in mood and emotion, they include depressive disorder and bipolar and related disorder. Depressive disorder include major depressive disorder, which is characterized by episodes of profound sadness and a loss of interest or pleasure of usual activity. Bipolar disorder is characterized by, again, mood disorders that vacillate between sadness and entropia. And the diagnosis of bipolar disorder requires experiencing at least one manic episode, which is defined as period of extreme irritability and increased activities. And mood disorder appear to have genetic component, and the genetic factor play prominent role in bipolar disorders and depression. Both biological and psychological factors are important in development of depression disorders. That is basic and the most important one. And to say something on the issues more focusing on this, basically more dealing with this schizophrenia again is one most important. Schizophrenia, this basically the last and the most portion of part 2, basically more focusing on issues in relation to schizophrenia, and we'll finalize this part 2. Schizophrenia basically more focusing on devastating psychological disorder that is characterized by major disturbance in thought, perception, emotion, and behaviors. Frequent hospitalization are more often the rule rather than exception of this schizophrenia. And in general, what schizophrenia is not a condition splitting personality. Schizophrenia is the same thing as dissociative identity disorder, is considered as psychotic disorder or one in which a person's thoughts, perception, behavior impaired to the point where she is not able to function in normal life. Different symptom, hallucination one most important, absence of external stimulation, and less common in visual hallucination. Delusion is another one, more focusing on beliefs that contrary to reality and firmly held in the face of contradictory evidence, and disorganized and schizophrenia. And the basic causes of schizophrenia, for example, genetic is one most important. The issue in relation to neurotransmitter, the brain anatomy is one most important. Event during pregnancy is most important. Early warning, there is some sign for schizophrenia is most important. In summary, in general, schizophrenia is severe disorder characterized by complete breakdown of one's ability to function in life, often requires hospitalization. People with schizophrenia experience hallucination and delusion, and they have extremely difficult regulating their emotion and behavior. Thinking is incoherent, disorganized, behavior is extremely bizarre, emotion felt, motivation engaged in basic life of activities lacking. Considering genetic factors, the central factor for schizophrenia, neurotransmitter and the brain abnormality is another factor for schizophrenia. And research indicates that individuals who show pronarial symptoms are following them over the time to determine which factor best predict development of schizophrenia. That is most important and the last for chapter part 2. And we proceed chapter 3 after a few minutes.